Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. This is Miss Tomei. So, I first wanted to start off by singing our very famous song here. Does anyone remember it? I'm totally going to embarrass myself, but I do it for you guys. So, I've got x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Alright, so now we have that done and over with here. I want us to start to solve using the quadratic formula. Right here, given to you, as I just previously sang. So, we're given 3x minus 7 equals x squared. Now, in order for us to solve a quadratic equation, we have to set the equation equal to 0. So, I'm going to bring over this x squared. I'm going to subtract this over because I want to set this equal to 0. I'll have negative x squared plus 3x minus 7 equals 0. Why are we setting it equal to 0? Because we're trying to find the zeros. Find the zeros or roots. Okay? Alright. So, we've got to identify our a, b, and c values. I've got a equals, b equals, and c equals. We're going to go in order. This is in standard form. So, out here I have a negative 1 out front. So a is going to be negative 1 next to the x squared. Out front of our x variable, we have a 3 out front for b. And c is negative 7, just going in order. Alright, I've got to fill in the quadratic formula here. I've got x equals negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 3 squared minus 4 times negative 1 times negative 7 all over 2 times negative 1. Just filling in literally the variables into this equation. We're just filling it in. Alright, now I gotta simplify a little bit here. So I'm just gonna rewrite this. I have x equals negative 3 plus or minus the square root. Okay, now guys, you are going to take literally what is inside the square root and put this into your calculator. Do not, and I repeat, do not use the radical when you're putting that in the calc. You are literally going to type that in the calculator and get a value. So let's see what we get. Alright, so when we put this whole thing in the calculator here, we get negative 28 all over negative 2. Now, you should be pausing to think for a second here. Can I take the square root of a negative number? Absolutely not, Miss Tomei. We cannot take the square root of a negative number. So, our solution here, guys, we're going to write there are no real roots. Oops, sorry about that. We're going to say no real roots. There's no real roots. Can't take the square root of a negative number here, so it doesn't work out. Alright? This is your answer. Alright, so let's take a look at something that actually is going to have roots. So let's see. Alright, let's take a look at question number 6. So, we first have to get this into standard form to solve a quadratic. Solving a quadratic, set it equal to 0. So let's do that first. I'm going to subtract 6x. And I'm going to add 1 on both sides. Cancel out. I'm left with 9x squared minus 6x plus 1 equals 0. Guys, remember, when you're solving a quadratic, you're finding the zeros. So in this picture I just drew, this is what you're finding, what I'm highlighting here in red. Those are your roots. Those are your roots, or what we call zeros. Set the equation equal to 0. Alright, that's enough of that. You're probably going to get so sick and tired of me saying that. Alright, so we've got to identify what is A, what is B, and what is C. So here we're going to go in order. there's A, it's 9. B right there, -6. And then C is just 1. So, we're going to fill in for the quadratic formula. Alright, remember the song? X equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Alright, let's start to plug and chug here, guys. Let's fill this in. We've got x equals -6 plus or minus the square root of -6 squared, parentheses, guys, minus 4 times a, which is 9, times c, which is 1, all over 2 times a. Just filling it in. Again, what's underneath the radical here, you should be putting directly into the calculator. What's underneath the radical. Okay? You should not be including the radical. So when you type this into the calculator, when you type what's underneath the radical here, yeah, that's better for you to look at. When you type that in the calculator, let's see what we get. Alright, and we get x equals negative becomes +6 plus or minus the square root. Well, I have -6 squared minus 4 times 9 times 1. I'm putting that directly in the calculator, and I get 0. Whew, all over 18. Well, guys, square root of 0 is just 0. So this is going to be 6 plus or minus 0 all over 18. Should I be branching this out here, 6 plus 0 and then 6 minus 0? Does that make a difference? No, you're going to get the same thing. So our answer here is going to be x equals 6 over 18, or we can simplify that more, and we'll get x equals what? What do you guys get? 1/3. Very good. So this is only going to cross the x-axis once. All right, let's just take a look at one more, and I think you guys are going to be good to go. All right, let's look at question number 7. Again, it's asking you to use the quadratic formula, so you better use it. We've got x equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. All right, so guys, before we can even use the quadratic formula, we got to get this equal to what? 0. We are finding the zeros. So I have 2x squared equals -4x plus 16. This is not in standard quadratic form. I've got to bring over the 4x, and I've got to subtract the 16 over. So we got to bring over 4x and subtract the 16. Don't forget, guys, this whole thing is going to equal 0. Even though these things up here cancel, okay, it's going to equal 0. So now, what can we do next? Now, what I like to do, just to make the quadratic a little easier to solve, is I'm going to actually factor out the GCF. So if you guys notice, I can divide everything here by 2. Everything gets divided by 2. It all has a 2 in common. Your GCF is 2, just to make life a little easier. Okay, well, that becomes just x squared. This here becomes 2x. And here I have -8 equals 0 divided by 2 is just 0. All right, so let's use the quadratic formula on this. I've got x equals, oh, but before we do that, we got to say what a and b and c are. A is going to be 1, b is going to be 2, and c is going to be -8. So let's start to fill this in. I have -2 plus or minus square root +2 squared minus 4 times 1 times -8 all over 2 times 1. All right, so let's simplify this a little bit. And again, what's underneath that radical here, guys, you should be putting directly in the calc. Do not try to do this by hand. Put this directly in your calculator, what's underneath the radical. So let's see what we get when we simplify. Oops. We've got x equals -2 plus or minus the square root of 36 all over 2. All right. Well, guys, we should know what the square root of 36 is. This is going to reduce to x equals -2 plus or minus 6 all over 2. All right, great. We can continue to simplify this. I'm just moving this over just for some space, so I'm going to write this over here. So we have x equals -2 plus or minus 6 all over 2. All right, well, let's break this up. We're going to split this up into our two answers here. So we have x equals -2 plus 6 over 2. And then I have x equals -2 minus 6 all over 2. Here I'll get x equals 2 as my final answer here. And here I will get x equals -4. Those are my two roots. Again, if I were to sketch this out, this is going to cross here. Pretend that that's at -4. And we'll pretend that that's at 2. That's what my graph would look like. This would be where my roots are, here and here, highlighted in red right now. All right, well, I hope this was helpful for you guys in finding the zeros and roots of a quadratic function. Remember, always set it equal to 0. Don't forget your formula. Have a good night, guys.